All right, guys, it's me, Daniel. I'm back with another quote. This one I pulled up from Facebook. It says, "Don't let small minds or small towns stop you from doing big things." This is a Morgan Richard Olivier quote, which, if you're familiar with my TikTok, you'll know that I did a previous quote from him. So let's talk about that for a minute, right? All right. Small towns. They're everywhere. I come from multiple small towns. I grew up as a military kid. Constantly moving, constantly going to different places. And one of the last places I had ended up was a small town called Ruckersville. That's one of the last places I had lived. Ruckersville has a lot of things going for it. I mean, it's a really close-knit community. The problem with close-knit communities is they tend to bring in this idea that everybody has roughly the same idea. There's not a whole lot of room for emotional growth. There's just not. It doesn't mean that it can always end up that way. That's just what I grew up with. There are a few places where I've been either visiting or just visiting, lived. I visited Paducah, Kentucky a lot. I visited, let's see here, Coburn, Virginia. I've been to Vines Grove, Kentucky. I've been to Hampton, Virginia, Suffolk, Virginia, which Suffolk was a little bigger. Hampton, I want to say, was bigger, but I didn't know a whole lot of people, but I was also really little. I've been to Hendersonville. There's a lot of different places that have really close communities. Some of these communities have changed. Some of the places I've been, they got bigger over time. Heck, I found out from friends that Paducah's actually a lot bigger than I thought it was. I've also been to San Antonio. That was crazy. Biggest city I'd ever seen. But there wasn't, in some of these places, there's not a whole lot of diversity. So the thing with that is, whenever you're in a small town, you tend to stop challenging the things that you are told, because everybody says the same thing, so it's got to be true, right? Not always the case. I grew up, not from my family, but from the people around me, being told that being gay was not okay. Being anything other than this straight, emotionally bottling male was just not normal. It was absurd. It was not okay. You actually got bullied for that kind of thing. That being said, there were plenty of lesbian population, albeit, I feel like they got bullied just as much as, the bi and gay guys that were in school whenever I was a kid. In Hawaii, you rarely saw a white guy, but then again, Hawaiians didn't really want us there to begin with. There's some discourse there, but that's a different topic for a different time. Well, we may actually touch up on that one. But like in a smaller town, you don't get a whole lot of diversity. You actually tend to build your mindset and build your life around this idea that these things just are. But they don't have to be. Okay? As I got older and started traveling more, I learned that environments have a very big effect on how your mindset is. Growing up, I didn't know how to communicate very well. So there wasn't a whole lot of room for growth. My environment at the time, I made a horrible environment, okay? I was a problem kid. I was always up to something, I had issues as a kid, all right? I was the Billy Badass and the troublemaker, and I did so many things to get attention because I didn't know how to really talk about my issues. As an adult, I got away from that environment. I kept moving from place to place, trying thing after thing. And so what I ended up finding when I finally moved to where I am now was that now that my environment has changed, I don't have all the same things going around all the time. I was actually free to discover who I was and what that actually meant. I discovered that, I wasn't straight. I discovered I'm not agnostic. I'm actually, I'm Christian. And yes, for those of you out there, gay Christians are a thing. It's actually nice knowing that it's not just me. Which on a separate tangent, I'm going to church again, which is really nice. But these things have to be considered. So, what do we mean about environment? An environment pertains to what you deal with on the day-to-day. Okay, we're not just talking about where you live, okay? We're talking about the ideas that you surround yourself with, the friends that you have, the things that you are consistently dealing with every single day. For you workaholics out there, your environment consists of your work, okay? If you do not spend any time doing anything else, your environment is your work. For the people that are always at home, your environment is your home. So the people that are in your home, or the lack of people in your home, these things are what makes up your world. If you go out all the time and you're constantly going places, you actually have a chance to expand your environment, expand your viewpoints, trying new ideas, figuring out different ways to accomplish different tasks. This is all a thing. I found that staying home, while it can be safe, it will damage you over time. I'm actually looking at going out and doing more things, going to more conventions, because honestly, I loved doing it with one of my best friends, and I can't do that right now with that person. But you know what? I loved it enough that I want to keep doing it. Eventually I might get into cosplay. I kind of have a few things that I need to handle first, but this is something that I've chosen for myself. If you've been on my TikTok at all, building an environment is always important. And I am sorry, my cat decided to come and say hi. So she's going to come and say hi for a bit. For those that you don't know her, this is Yuki Asuna. She is a wonderful little cat. She is my child. Yeah. I also need to keep her tail out of my face. But, you know, being able to expand on your environment doesn't have to just be something you figure out on your own. You know, you can always try new things with the people around you. You know, like I said, one of my best friends, you know, I met at a convention, or not a convention, it was a festival. Apologies. But we started going to conventions and we met more people and more people had different ideas and it was just so cool, you know? And, you know, I met more friends that way. You know, it's wonderful what you can find and what you can accomplish when you actually make it outside of these smaller environments. And that's part of what the whole small minds, small towns thing's about. You know, in a smaller area, you don't have as much room to grow. So you need to expand how you grow. You need to be able to go out and figure new things out and make decisions for yourself. And, you know, that's kind of... That's something I really want to impart on everybody. It's not always about what's wrong with you. Anyone that's been watching my TikTok will know that for a little bit I was really focusing on the personal side, you know? But it's not just about the person. It's bits and pieces all over. And you know, this is the kind of thing that can really make or break somebody. For someone who, as someone who has been through so many things and tried so many different ways to break out of the mold that I grew up in, you know, changing things up, finding a new way to exist matters. It's not going to be comfortable. I mean, like I said, I grew up moving. I have finally managed to stay put in one spot for a few years now. And it's been really nice. And I still travel. One of my recent, kind of recent, trips, I went to Louisville, Kentucky, and had a wonderful time. Another time, I believe... See, when we went to Louisville, we also went to Indiana, but that was something different. We also took a trip up to Illinois. That's actually the background of my streams. You know, I have a lot of good memories, you know, going and trying out new things. And I mean, as someone that struggles with change, being able to adapt to a new situation is highly dependent on how willing you are to change the way you think. The more you're willing to challenge ideas and challenge a thought process, the easier it gets, and the better you get at it, really. You know, I've had a lot of relationships. A good chunk of them ended badly. I've made some friends out of them. That's really only happened twice. But the thing that always seemed to go wrong in my relationships is I was stuck in this enclosed environment. There was never any real change. And that's something I had to work on. And so recently, you know, there was a change in my relationship status, but it wasn't like a bad breakup, you know? It was one of those where it was things just can't work right now. There was too much happening. Because, hi baby, we had gotten into an environment where, things weren't able to progress anymore, and we hadn't made it to the, or at least I hadn't made it to the part where I started regressing. I'm not 100% sure about my partner at the time, but that was something that needed to change. And so, we did what we had to in order to separate, and that was how things needed to go. Hi. Hello. I am so sorry I'm talking to the internet. But we had different environments that we were surrounded in all the time. And I think one of the things that can happen in any relationship or in any friendship, and when I say relationship, I don't just mean with a romantic partner. I do mean friendships, familial ties, that type of thing. When environments start blending with each other, it can cause friction. But the way you handle your environments can also cause friction. One of the things I ran into with a lot of people that I met was that the way I handled my environment didn't always mesh. I tend to be incredibly open about everything, and I mean that's kind of just part of who I am, and that doesn't work for everybody. I've got friends that I struggle to talk to, and I've got friends that I can talk to about everything. It's one of those things where you've got to pick and choose how to go about it. And when we dive into the relationship side, like a romantic relationship, if you and your partner or partners, in some cases, don't agree on how an environment should grow, you're not going to mesh. You're actually going to start conflicting. Now that may not be like an overriding issue. Okay, some people can work through it. Some people can't. I'm not really saying I've had that particular issue. I've had it with my friends. There was a time where I was homeless, and I had moved in with a friend of mine, and let me tell you, we were different as hell. But he managed to nurse me back to health, because I was malnourished. I was severely underweight, and I was barely functioning as a human being. It sucked. And, I was at a really low point in my life. I had just attempted to commit suicide, and this was something that I could not pull off, and for good reason. Thankfully my survival instincts kicked in, and my ability to do things just vanished. But moving on from that point, I had a new environment. I was introduced to a lot of different things, And, it worked for about 4 months. I was not in a place in my life where I could make any mature decisions because I was still very hurt and very broken. And yes, being broken is a thing. The thing about it is how do you start working with the pieces? How do you start putting yourself back together? I've been very fortunate growing up. I don't have a lot of things that I can say were absolutely horrible. Okay? I mean, I've had anxiety attacks, I've had flashbacks, I've had night terrors, I've had regular nightmares, and I have a slew of abandonment trauma. These are all a pain in the ass, okay? Like, it's not easy. And I will never say it's easy. But what I've been able to do is I've been able to move forward with these and change them up to something I could actually deal with. And that in of itself made all the difference. It's not always about whether or not you can... It's not always about whether or not you can handle it in that particular moment. Changing up your environment and changing the way you view things can often go hand in hand. Sometimes before you can actually change the way you view something, you've actually got to change your environment, and sometimes vice versa. Sometimes you've got to be able to change your mindset before you can work in an environment, before you can function. And that was something that I had to come to terms with. So, what does this mean for everybody else? Excuse me. Whether you're in a big city or a small town, or if you're living in a camper somewhere, being able to recognize that where the bounds of your environment are and how you are, what you have included in that environment makes a huge difference. Whenever I finally moved out here, I had a very small, environment because I secluded myself, because I was trying to heal. Over time and over the years, as I went through situation after situation, I learned how to grow my environment. I don't just sit in my room anymore. Now I have kind of like this shared space here, and now I actually go out and do things. I might go to the bar and have a drink. I might go to a convention. I might go to a bookstore. I might take a couple-hour trip to another state just to go see what's going on there. These are all things that I do. These are all things that I enjoy. And nobody... There are very few instances where I can think of that something can change in a flash. 9 times out of 10, it ain't gonna happen. I learned from, a therapist that I had that my brain works by something called code switching, in which it's like you're writing a script, okay? And that script has very particular things in it, like you always wash your hands after going to the toilet, okay? that is a script. That's a code. That is like a line of code. Okay? You know, it's a if this, then this type of thing for me. I've been able to adapt a little bit since, learning that and learning how to mold and shape it. It's less of a if this, then this, and now it's a flow type of deal. But it took time for me to get from chunking to, okay, this is just the way of things. This is how we can flow from one idea to another, and it can flow this way, it can flow this way. Sometimes it can back up. Like this is something that it took time for me to learn. And so, I got used to this. And this kind of mindset I could have never hit if I hadn't changed my environment. Back in Runkersville, I wasn't very capable of changing the way I thought because I was always angry all the time. Now that I'm away from that, and now that I don't have as much pressure on top of me, I was able to grow. And so that's really the point that I'm trying to get at here with this particular quote. Small minds, small towns. Expand. Learn what things work, learn what things make you happy, and learn what doesn't work. Learn how to enrich your enclosure, okay? Learn how to make things hospitable for yourself. You don't always have to move. You can learn how to function in a small town, okay? It is possible. You don't have to move out of a small town. It's not a necessarily bad thing. It's just you need to learn how to function in it. How do you keep yourself from getting stagnant? How can you go from this small, scared person to, life is great, there's sunshine everywhere? How do you do that? For me, it's traveling and learning and seeing new places. That's something I like to do. And it's also being able to help, which is why I started this whole thing to begin with. And that, folks, is exactly what we're trying to get at here. And so, I leave with this moniker after most of my TikTok videos, and I think I'm going to carry it on here. Take your loved ones. Tell them that you love them and that you miss them and that you are proud of them. And take yourself. Tell yourself that you love yourself. Whether you do or not, you should love yourself. Find something that you're proud of and make sure you really hit on that. And you know what? Everything will be okay. I tell my loved ones at the end of every video that I love and miss them so much. And I am very, very proud of the people that they have become and that they are becoming. So, something to think about. Thanks for joining me.